They say that when you reach 50, you're supposed to feel something, a shift, a reckoning, a quiet awareness of the years behind you and the years ahead. I didn't expect a parade. I didn't expect cake or candles or people singing off key around a kitchen island. But if you had asked me what I expected on my 50th birthday, I would have said something simple. A hug, a hey, happy birthday, a moment. But simplicity, I've learned, is easy to overlook. My name is Marina Holloway, and for most of my life, I've been the quiet kind of dependable. The kind of woman who keeps everything running without needing applause. The errands, the repairs, the schedules, the cooking, the emotional labor. I handled it all because I loved the people around me. My long-term boyfriend, Evan, and his two kids, Luke and Caroline. I stepped into their lives long before I realized what it meant to disappear inside a family. It's funny how invisibility sneaks up on you. You don't notice the first time someone forgets to say thank you. You don't notice the 10th time. You don't notice when you start anticipating the disappointment before it arrives. And you definitely don't notice the moment when you stop expecting appreciation entirely. But you notice when your 50th birthday passes without a word. That morning started like every other. I woke early, not because I had to, but because I always did. Old habit. I brewed the coffee. Evan likes a medium roast with a splash of oat milk, and set out bowls for the kids. Luke liked granola. Caroline insisted she didn't eat breakfast, but always stole a bite from my plate. No one came into the kitchen long enough to see the small note I'd scribbled the night before and hidden in my pocket, just in case Evan remembered, just in case the kids planned something. It was silly, childish even, but old hope dies slow. Evan walked in wearing the same gym shorts and half-awake expression he always had. He kissed the top of my head out of habit, not affection, and grabbed his coffee. He didn't even glance at the calendar where I'd circled today's date in faint blue pen. Not a bright circle, just enough for someone who knew me to notice. "You're up early," he said, scrolling through messages on his phone. "I'm always up early," I said with a smile that felt too heavy. The kids trickled in, half-dressed, half-awake, fully distracted. Luke complained about a summer class. Caroline asked for extra money for a school event. They talked around me, not to me. By the time they all left the kitchen, I felt like background noise in my own home. I cleaned up breakfast. I drove Evan's forgotten gym bag to his workplace. I picked up groceries. I folded laundry. I replaced the batteries in the smoke detector. I did all the things that kept the house running, all the things no one else noticed. By dinner, the day felt like a taut string wrapped around my chest. Evan came home complaining about work. Caroline slammed her door because her friend canceled plans. Luke spent most of dinner scrolling. The empty chair I sat in might as well have been a coat rack. Not a word, not even a glance. And as I watched all three of them tangling themselves in their own worlds, something quietly devastating settled inside me. They hadn't forgotten unintentionally. They had forgotten because remembering me took effort. When dinner was done, cooked by me, cleaned by me, I walked into the garage, stood in front of the wall of shelves, and pulled down my small duffel bag, the one I kept for overnight trips we never took anymore. I packed slowly. Shirts, a toothbrush, a pair of jeans, nothing sentimental. I didn't have anything sentimental left. Then I slid the silver commitment ring Evan gave me 7 years ago onto the kitchen counter. The metal clicked sharply against the granite, a tiny accidental sound that felt like a gunshot in an empty church. No one looked up. I walked to the front door. No one asked where I was going. No one followed. I didn't slam the door. I didn't dramatize it. I just left. And the moment the door shut behind me, the silence was deafening in a way that felt almost holy. Like the world itself was pausing to acknowledge what the people in my life never had. I drove to a cheap motel on the outskirts of town. The room smelled faintly of bleach and loneliness. The bedspread had a pattern that made my eyes hurt if I stared too long. It wasn't peaceful, but it wasn't suffocating either. It was still. For the first time in years, the air around me wasn't thick with expectation. The first night I lay awake staring at the ceiling fan, waiting for my phone to buzz, waiting for someone, anyone to remember. It didn't ring. Not that night, not the next morning, not the day after that. By day 4, I stopped staring at my phone and started staring at my own reflection. My tired eyes, the lines on my face, the woman who had been quietly unraveling one forgotten moment at a time. By day 7, something inside me hardened. Not in bitterness, more like a bone finally healing in the right position after being set wrong for too long. By day 10, I realized that sometimes the people you love need to lose you before they even realize you were carrying them. By day 12, I understood the truth I had been avoiding. I hadn't just been forgotten, I had been erased. On day 13, Evan finally posted something online. A dramatic Facebook message of all things. I see your empty chair every night. Please come home. I miss you. Hundreds of sympathetic comments. Not one person asked what had happened. Not one person asked what I felt. They mourned the woman they thought I was. They pitied the man they thought he was. And that was the moment I knew. This wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of the true one. The moment everything would shift. The moment this story really begins. I used to think silence was passive, that it meant nothing, or worse, said nothing. But in those 2 weeks after I left, I learned silence is a language all its own. It exposes people. It unsettles them. It forces them to fill the empty space with their assumptions, and that's exactly what Evan and everyone around him did. My phone didn't ring once. Not from Evan, not from the kids, not from friends I'd cooked for, listened to, comforted through divorces and job losses. Not from the people who used to sit at my dining table praising the meals I made while ignoring the hands that made them. Nothing. Then came day 13. That's when Evan broke the silence, not by calling me, not by texting, not by reaching out like someone who realized he'd failed the woman who held his entire life together. He posted on Facebook. I was sitting on the edge of the motel bed when I saw my phone light up. A notification, tagged in a mutual friend's comment. I tapped it open. There it was. A photo of our kitchen table, my empty chair. The caption, I see your empty seat every night. Marina, please come home. We miss you. For a moment, I didn't feel anything. Not anger, not regret, just the kind of numbness that happens when an answer is so obvious it stops hurting. Hundreds of comments flooded under the post. Stay strong. Evan, she'll come around. Women have emotional phases at that age. She must be overwhelmed. Give her grace. Not one comment asked what pushed me out. Not one said my name with concern for me. Not one wondered if perhaps the woman who fed, cleaned, managed, organized, supported could have broken under the weight of being everyone's backbone. They wrote my entire story without me. I scrolled through the online pity parade, watching strangers turn me into a fragile, unstable caricature. A woman who crumbled out of nowhere. Not the woman who had been quietly fading for years. But the comment that cemented everything came from Evan's mother. Marina always struggled with commitment. She'll come home once she calms down. I stared at the screen, stunned. Me. Struggling with commitment. I gave up promotions, weekends, travel hobbies, my entire identity to support her son. I raised grandchildren that weren't mine. I poured myself into a life that demanded everything and gave so little back. Commitment. I had been committed to the point of erasure. I tossed the phone onto the bed and stood. I needed air, not motel air, not recycled air, real air, fresh air. And I needed something else too, though I didn't know what yet. I drove without thinking. The kind of silent autopilot drive you take when your body moves because your heart can't. I didn't know where I was going until I realized my hands had already chosen for me. Evans Street. Our street. I parked 2 houses down where the hydrangea bushes grew wild over the fence. The sky was gray heavy, like the world was holding its breath. I walked along the sidewalk slowly, each step feeling like an echo from a life I wasn't sure belonged to me anymore. The house looked the same. That was the first blow. Same flower pots, same wind chimes, same welcome mat I replaced every year. But something else was different. It was clean. Too clean. Evan never cleaned unless company was coming. The spotless porch, the freshly swept steps, the polished windows, a performance. I slipped through the side gate quietly out of habit. No one ever moved the spare key because no one ever thought they needed to. The inside was unnerving. The counters were wiped, the sink was empty, the table was set. A pastel envelope sat among the mail. The name written on the front in glittery cursive, Caroline. Inside a card, congratulations on your acceptance to the nursing program. We're so proud of you. We meaning the grandparents who knew something important before I did. I read the line again. My chest tightened. I had stayed up all night helping Caroline study for her entrance exam. They didn't even tell me she got in. Another envelope lay half hidden under a flyer, a reminder for a family barbecue. Evan's handwriting circled Saturday 3 p.m. The same Saturday I spent alone in a motel room pretending I didn't care that no one remembered my birthday. The irony was suffocating. I walked down the hall past the photos I had arranged on the wall years ago. The frames were slightly crooked. They always were when Caroline hurried out the door. I used to straighten them every night. Now I kept walking. As I neared her old bedroom, I heard voices. Light, casual, discussing me like I was some side character in their show. "She's already talking to that guy from the gym," Luke said. I froze, my spine locked. "You think Mom's serious?" Caroline asked. "She says she's not dating, but I saw the messages." Caroline snorted. "Dad's only been gone what? 2 weeks. 13 days, Luke said. Not that anyone's counting." They laughed. I felt something inside me tilt sharply, a deep, cold, cutting clarity. They weren't sad. They weren't confused. They weren't even curious. They were spectators. I stepped back from the door, nausea curling through my stomach. My throat burned, but no tears came. I walked down the hall, each footstep heavier than the last. Each step peeling away the last strands of hope I didn't know I still had. I walked through the living room and out the front door. This time I didn't close it quietly. I let it slam. A sharp cracking echo. Maybe they heard it. Maybe they didn't. Maybe they didn't care either way. When I reached the motel again, I sat in the car with the engine off. The silence inside the vehicle felt different. Not empty, not lonely, sharp-edged, focused. My grief had burned through its last spark and hardened into something else entirely. Awakening. I had spent years thinking love was about giving without asking anything back. But love without respect is just servitude. I pressed my forehead to the steering wheel and exhaled. I wasn't going back. Not now. Maybe not ever. For the first time in my life, I wasn't scared of the unknown. I was terrified of returning to what I now understood was killing me. I didn't have a plan that night. But as I lay awake in that motel bed staring at the ceiling, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. If they could erase me so easily, then I would build a life so bright, so undeniable, that they couldn't ignore me again, even if they tried. And to do that, I first had to go somewhere I hadn't gone in a very long time, to someone who remembered me when I still remembered myself. The farther I drove from that town, the more I felt pieces of myself unknotting, slowly, painfully, but undeniably. The road stretched ahead in a faded ribbon, and with every mile I felt the air shift. Not lighter exactly, but less suffocating. Like I was peeling myself away from a life that had held me too tightly for too long. I didn't have a real plan when I left the motel. I just drove. My hands moved on their own, guided by instinct, or maybe by exhaustion, toward the one person who had ever made me feel like I could breathe without apologizing for it. My cousin Mason. We hadn't spoken in years, but when I called and said I need a place for a little while, he didn't ask for explanations. He didn't act shocked. He just gave an address and said, "Get here before dinner, and bring beer." That was it. Ashford was a quiet town, more a suggestion of civilization than an actual place. Stores closed at 5. Everyone waved at everyone. The local diners still used paper menus laminated, sometime around 1998. It was the kind of town where time didn't so much pass as drift. Exactly what I needed. Mason's repair shop sat on a dusty lot like it had grown there by accident. The paint was peeling, the porch swing looked ready to collapse, and the open sign hung crooked in the window. But when Mason opened the door and saw me standing there, he lit up like a man seeing an old friend return from war. "You look like hell," he said. "Nice to see you too," I muttered. He hugged me so tight it squeezed the breath out of my chest, then dragged me inside and shoved a beer into my hand. He heated up leftover enchiladas, sat down, and said, "All right, let's hear it." So I told him. Everything. The forgotten birthday, the Facebook performance, the barbecue invitation on the fridge, Evan's sudden online dramatics, the overheard conversation about him talking to the woman from the gym, the kids' laughter, the cardigan on someone else's shoulders, the empty silence that followed me like a shadow. I spoke for so long I didn't realize how much I'd bottled up. Mason listened without interrupting, without making pity faces, without telling me to go back and talk it out. When I finally stopped, he leaned back, nodded, and cracked open another beer. "You know," he said, "most people wait until they've had 2 drinks before admitting their whole life fell apart." I actually laughed. It felt strange coming out rusty, like rediscovering a language I hadn't spoken in years. The next morning, he handed me a cup of coffee and a set of keys. "You're working here now," he said. "Mason, I don't know how to fix cars. Good thing we start with sweeping. You're qualified for that." So I swept. I swept until my shoulders ached and my palms were sore. I swept until the shop floor stopped looking like a metaphor for my mental state. There was something oddly therapeutic about it. Simple work, physical work, Work that didn't demand emotional contortion or quiet compliance. Over the next weeks, Mason taught me small things: how to organize tools, how to change oil, how to greet customers without sounding like I was about to cry. The shop radio played old country songs. The days were long, but mercifully predictable, and for the first time in years, silence felt like peace instead of punishment. At night, we'd sit on the porch swing outside his house. I'd write in a cheap notebook he insisted I keep. Mason wasn't the sentimental type, but he believed everyone needed a place to put their thoughts so they didn't rot inside. I filled page after page, some with frustration, some with memories, some with questions I wasn't ready to answer. One night I caught my reflection in the shop window. I looked tired, yes, but something had changed. My shoulders weren't hunched the way they had been for years. My eyes didn't look hollow. I was still bruised, still raw, but less broken. Like someone had reattached a string that had snapped but hadn't realized it. I started cooking again, dishes I used to love making before I became the person who cooked only to feed everyone else. Mason devoured everything and said, "See, told you you'd come back to life." And he was right. I was coming back to life. Slowly, stubbornly, one small reclaiming at a time. 2 months passed, and I slipped into new routines. Morning bike rides on an old half-rusted bicycle, novels from the thrift store, podcasts about small businesses, even learning basic repairs at the shop. Each day felt a little less heavy. Until one night, while scrolling through my phone, I saw a tagged picture of Caroline at her college orientation. She was smiling wide, happy, carefree. Beside her stood Evan, and beside him stood the woman he swore meant nothing. She was wearing my lavender cardigan, one of the few things I'd kept for myself over the years. There it was, proof, so casual, so cold. A sharpness sliced through me clean, not violent. The kind of pain that doesn't destroy, but clarifies. They weren't waiting for me. They weren't even struggling. They had folded me out of the picture so easily, I might as well have been a placeholder someone replaced in a house listing. But instead of falling apart, I felt something steady rise in me. Focus. If they could move on with that level of ease, then I could build something of my own with equal ferocity. I started researching that night. Business courses, certification programs, trade licenses, grants for women entering technical fields. Late into the night, I devoured articles, forums, videos, anything I could absorb. The next morning, I signed up for a professional service management course, expensive, intense, and completely out of my comfort zone. It felt perfect. For the first time in years, I wasn't pouring myself into someone else's life. I was investing in myself. Every night after the shop closed, I studied. I learned about pricing structures, service contracts, customer acquisition equipment, leasing, branding. My notebooks filled with ideas, sketches, business plans, possible names for a company I didn't yet fully believe I could build. Then one evening, sitting at the table reviewing a lesson on profit margins, my phone lit up. Evan. For a moment, I froze. The woman I used to be would have answered on the first ring. This woman. She let it ring twice. "Hello," I finally said. There was a silence, one that felt like someone holding their breath on the other side. "Marina, it's me." His voice sounded the same, but it hit me differently now, like hearing a song you once loved, but no longer relate to. "What do you need?" I asked, steady. I just want to talk, in person, about us." "There is no us." "I miss you," he whispered. "The kids miss you." I tasted bitterness, not because of him, but because of how long I believed those words meant something. "I'm not the same woman who left," I said. "You sound different." "I am." When I hung up, I realized it fully finally. He didn't know who he was talking to. The woman he wanted back no longer existed. And the woman I was becoming, she was only getting started. The morning after Evan's call, I woke up before sunrise with a feeling I hadn't experienced in years. Purpose. Not obligation. Not duty. Not that grinding sense of being needed without being valued. Purpose. A direction that pointed towards something that belonged only to me. The business course was transforming my thinking. What started as scribbled notes in a thrift store notebook had deepened into something real, something sharp and structured. I began drafting a name, a vision, a model. I wasn't just learning how to run a business, I was planning mine. It still felt unbelievable sometimes. Me at 50, rebuilding from zero. But maybe rebuilding wasn't even the right word. I wasn't patching the broken pieces of my old life. I was replacing the entire foundation. One night, Mason glanced at the sketch of a logo on my notebook. "You thinking about launching this for real?" he asked. "For real," I said. He nodded like he'd been expecting that answer for months. "You'll need branding," he said. and I know someone. That's how I ended up sitting in a diner 2 towns over with Mason's ex-wife's brother, a marketing consultant named Caleb with slick hair, expensive glasses, and a laptop that probably cost more than my car. He studied my rough website mock-up and the name I'd written at the top of the page, Seawind Home Solutions. "It sounds trustworthy," he said. "And you look trustworthy. That's your advantage." I raised an eyebrow. "Is that a polite way of saying I look like someone's mom?" He grinned. "No, it's a polite way of saying you look like someone people don't expect to scam them. Trust is currency. You have it. Let's use it." Within a week, he and his team built a brand kit with clean colors, a sharp logo, professional typography, and uniforms so crisp they practically ironed themselves. He made me film a short introduction video, nothing dramatic, just me walking through a workspace talking about honest service, fair pricing, and restoring integrity to home repair. "Be yourself," he said from behind the camera. "You're not selling the service, you're selling you." I guess he did his job well because the video quietly started circulating. People shared it. A local blogger reposted it. Then a community page picked it up. Suddenly, I was getting calls from people who didn't know me, but trusted what they saw. In my first month of soft launching, the business, I got more appointments than Evan's usual guy in town, the one who always overcharged and showed up late. Customers liked that I explained things clearly. They liked that I didn't talk down to them. They liked that I wasn't trying to upsell them into bankruptcy. Word spread in a way that felt unreal. A retired teacher recommended me to her entire bridge club. A real estate agent referred me to her clients. Someone posted in a local moms group, "She fixed my AC without making me feel stupid, I'm telling everyone." Mason watched this happen with the kind of smug expression only cousins can get away with. "What did I tell you?" he said one evening. "You make people feel safe. That's rare." By the third month, I hired my first part-time employee. Then a second. I ordered a used service van and plastered my logo on the side. It wasn't perfect, slightly off-center air bubbles under the vinyl, but when I stood back and looked at it, I felt a swelling in my chest that I barely recognized. Pride. Not pride in keeping a household afloat or being the glue that held a family together. This was pride in myself, in something I built with my own hands and no one else's permission. The calls kept coming. They came from Ashford, from the next town over, and eventually, from my old one. The first time I recognized the area code, my stomach tightened. I nearly let it go to voicemail. Instead, I answered on the third ring. "Hi, my neighbor gave me your number," a woman said breathlessly. "Our AC's been out for a week. Can you come by tomorrow?" "Of course," I said. "What's your address?" She gave it. My breath caught. It was 2 blocks from the house I'd lived in for 13 years. When I arrived the next day, I parked down the street for a moment and just looked around. The neighborhood hadn't changed. Same stone mailboxes, same trimmed lawns, same kids' bikes scattered on the sidewalk. But something inside me had shifted so drastically that it felt like walking through a place built from someone else's memories. The woman greeted me warmly. "I didn't realize you were Marina Holloway," she said carefully. I heard your name before." Everyone had. The Facebook post alone guaranteed that. "I'm glad you reached out," I said. "I am too," she replied. "Your reputation is better than your ex's usual repair guy. And honestly," she lowered her voice, "people are starting to realize they didn't give you enough credit." I opened my tool bag slowly, letting her words settle. "Thank you," I said, and I meant it. The job went smoothly. She paid immediately. Before I left, she pressed a business card back into my hand. "Give this to anyone who needs reliable repairs," she said. "People talk in this neighborhood." And talk they did. Over the next weeks, clients from my old town called more and more neighbors. Friends of neighbors, people who remembered me from school events, even a man Evan used to play basketball with. Each new appointment felt like reclaiming a piece of a life I'd once believed I had to leave behind forever. But the appointment that changed everything happened 8 months after I left, when a woman called and said, "You're Marina, right? Evan Grant's girlfriend." "Ex-girlfriend," I corrected gently. "Well, I'd rather hire you anyway. You're the one with integrity." Hearing that from someone still living in his circle sent a warm, fierce sense of vindication through me. Not petty satisfaction, more like validation that I had been right to leave, right to rebuild, right to bet on myself. Within 2 months, I opened a second small office back in my old town. Not across the city, not far away. 2 blocks from Evan's usual grocery store, 3 blocks from his gym, 5 blocks from the house I used to clean from top to bottom. My van, with its unmistakable blue logo, parked outside every day. The first morning I unlocked the door to the new office, the sun just rising behind me, I sensed movement across the street. I turned. Evan stood there frozen mid-step, coffee in hand, staring at my company sign like it had materialized from thin air. His lips parted, his eyes widened. Shock, then confusion, then something that looked like regret tightening his jaw. He didn't wave, neither did I. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small in his presence. I didn't feel overlooked. I didn't feel like the woman who waited for scraps of appreciation. I felt like a woman with her name on a building. The message was silent but unmistakable. You erased me, but I rebuilt myself loud enough to echo. And I wasn't done yet. The turning point came in the form of an invitation, a neighborhood event hosted in the same backyard where my birthday had once been ignored without a second thought. Sponsors were welcome. I stared at the flyer for a long time before I picked up the phone. I'd like to sponsor the event, I said. The woman on the line sounded thrilled. Wonderful. We'll put your business name at the top of the banner. You're our largest contributor so far. Perfect, I said softly. My name, bold, undeniable, would hang in a yard where I had once been invisible. Not out of spite, out of reclamation. I wasn't just rebuilding. I was rising. The evening of the neighborhood fundraiser arrived with the kind of late summer heat that made the air feel heavy, almost expectant. I parked my van across the street first. Not because I was nervous, but because I wanted a moment to look at the place that once felt like home, really look at it. Evan's backyard glowed with string lights draped over the patio, the same ones I'd untangled and hung every summer. Guests milled around with drinks, smiling politely, unaware of the history woven into the grass beneath their feet. The long table one I had refinished myself years ago was covered in flowers and vegan appetizers, a detail so painfully on brand for Evan that I almost laughed. But the centerpiece wasn't the table, it wasn't the decorations, it wasn't the guests. It was the banner, stretched across the fence in elegant lettering, event sponsored by Seawind, Home Solutions. Owner Marina Holloway. My name, not tucked into a corner, not small print, top, center, impossible to ignore. I stood on the opposite sidewalk for a moment, not hiding, simply taking in the irony of it all. The yard that once held my silence now held my success. And as I crossed the street, all I felt was calm. Not vengeance, not bitterness, just a quiet certainty that I had become someone I could recognize again. The first person who saw me was Sharon, one of Evan's loudest friends, the neighborhood's self-appointed commentator, and the same woman who had once said I was too sensitive when Evan forgot anniversaries. Tonight, her eyes widened like she'd seen a ghost walk out of a luxury catalog. "Oh my God, Marina, you're here!" she squealed, grabbing my arm. "I had no idea Seawind was your business. It's incredible. Everyone's been talking about how your video went viral. And look at you. You look amazing." Her words felt like a performance, but not a malicious one. More like she was trying to adjust the script mid-show. I smiled politely. "Thank you for saying that." "Your work is unbelievable," she continued, lowering her voice. "Honestly, a lot of us didn't realize how much you did around here until you left. It's obvious now." That made something twist inside me, not pain, not pride, something in between. The acknowledgement I used to beg for, delivered too late to matter. Her friend joined in, pointing at the banner. "That is so classy. Sponsoring an event in your ex's yard. Bold move. Love it." I didn't correct her. I didn't need to. Whatever story people told about my choice wasn't my business. My intention had been simple: show up with dignity, leave with my head high. As I stepped further into the yard, more people recognized me. Neighbors who had once walked past me at the store, parents from school activities, women who had nodded politely while ignoring me during couples' nights. But tonight, they weren't ignoring me. They approached me. They shook my hand. They thanked me for sponsoring a cause they cared about. Some asked for business cards. Some complimented my work van. A few whispered that their furnace or AC needed servicing, and they preferred hiring me over the usual guy. For the first time in years, I wasn't the invisible woman in the corner. People saw me. Really saw me. And then inevitably, Evan saw me too. He approached from across the yard, weaving through guests, his eyes fixed on me, like I was the only person there. He looked almost startled, as if he had braced himself for the version of me he left behind and didn't know what to do with the woman in front of him instead. "Marina," he said softly when he reached me. I turned to him. "Evan, you look—" He paused. "Different." "I know." He swallowed, glancing around at the banner, at the people talking to me, at the ease with which I moved in a space that used to swallow me whole. "So," he said with a shaky breath, "you sponsored the event." "I did." "Why?" "Because I believe in the cause I said. And because this neighborhood deserves support. He waited, expecting more, expecting a confession, a plea, or even a jab. I gave him nothing. He shifted. It feels like you're making a point. I'm not, I said calmly. I'm living my life. That caught him off guard. He ran a hand through his hair the way he always did when he didn't know what to say. You rebuilt so quickly, he murmured. No, I corrected. I rebuilt slowly. You just didn't notice until now. He flinched, not dramatically, just enough for me to see the truth sink in. I wasn't here to hurt him, but the truth had its own sharpness. Before he could respond, a woman with a camera approached us. Hi, I'm from the community newsletter. Could I get a photo of our host and our main sponsor together? It'd be great for the article. Evan looked at me helplessly. I offered a polite smile. Of course. We stood side by side while the flash clicked. His posture was stiff. Mine wasn't. The entire moment felt surreal, the kind of poetic irony life hands you, not for revenge, but for closure. After the photographer left, Evan exhaled. Marina, I'm sorry, he whispered, for everything, for not seeing you, for not appreciating you, for letting you slip away. His voice trembled. A year ago, those words would have cracked me open. Tonight, they didn't move me at all. I'm not angry anymore, I said quietly, but I'm not coming back. He closed his eyes for a moment, and when he opened them, they looked older. Not wiser, just more aware of what he had lost and could never reclaim. I understand, he said, and he meant it. Without another word, I stepped away, leaving him standing alone in the backyard. He once expected me to maintain, decorate, host, and fill with warmth. Tonight it held none of my labor, only my name on a banner he couldn't avoid. I stayed long enough to greet a few more people, shake hands, accept compliments, and be present. Not loud, not boastful, just present. Then when the event found its rhythm without me, I slipped out, quietly, elegantly, on my own terms. Outside, under the soft hum of streetlights, I inhaled a deep breath. It didn't taste like victory. It tasted like alignment, like stepping into the life I should have been living years ago. My phone buzzed once, a voicemail, Evan. I didn't listen to it. Some things don't need to be revisited. I looked at my van, the logo glowing faintly under the lights. Seawind Home Solutions. My name, my work, my future. People once forgot my worth, so I built a life where no one could overlook me again. And as I drove away from that neighborhood steady, calm, undeniably whole, I knew one truth with absolute clarity. I didn't just walk away from them. I walked toward myself.